Welcome to this amazing video about the debit and credit concept. What you need to understand when we talk about accounting is that it's actually double entry bookkeeping. When you want to register a transaction in Odoo, you always need to have a balanced journal entry. You have one part on the debit side and one part on the credit side. Another thing is that debit must always equal to credit. You can't register a transaction without this rule being granted. Depending on how your accounts that you're using are behaving on the debit and credit side, it will have an impact on your reports. For example, if you want to register a salary entry on the debit side, you're going to have the expense of your employee's cost and you're going to need a counterpart. This counterpart is the employee's debt. In that case, you're using a current liabilities account. Basically, it's what you owe to the employee and what you're going to have to pay them at the end of the month. Let's see together how the different accounts work. Let's start with an active account. Let's say that you bought a new car. The car itself needs to be accounted for in your balance sheet in a fixed asset account. If you want to increase the value of this type of account, you need to put the amount on the debit side. In our example, as you buy a new car, it's already an additional value that you want to include in your asset. Thus, in your active part of your balance sheet, so the value of the car will be put on the debit side of the account in the accounting entry related to the purchase of the car. Now, let's switch to passive accounts. Passive accounts work the other way around than active accounts. For example, you receive a vendor bill for the purchase of furniture. What you owe to your vendor is to be represented in your payable account. So it's your vendor bill. That's the thing that you're going to have to pay at the end. Vendor bills are due payable accounts that are part of your liabilities, which are also part of the passive accounts of the balance sheet. If you need to increase the amount of liability, the value of the debts need to be represented on the credit side of the payable account. For the expense account, we're going to stick to the same example with the vendor bill. A vendor bill is always composed of two accounts, a payable account and an expense account. A vendor bill represents a debt to your vendor, but it's also where you record the cost that you need to represent in your profit and loss statement. In our example, the purchase of furniture is an additional cost that we want to show in our P&L. In order to do that, the value of the cost will be put on the debit side of the account. If we combine this with the previous example, which is the passive accounts, we see that the ID of the double entry is now complete because on the debit side, you're going to have the expense account and then its counterpart is going to be on the credit side with the payable account. Lastly, for income accounts, let's take this as an example. If you sell a product to your customer, you will generate an invoice. The sale of goods represents an income to your company. This income needs to be represented in your P&L statements. When you want to increase the value of your income accounts, you need to put this amount on the credit side. You can see that the behavior is very similar. In that case, we can say that passive and active accounts are contrary. Active will increase on the debit side and passive accounts will increase on the credit side. And that's the same thing for expenses and income. That's all for me on this video. Thank you for listening.